Hello and welcome to This Week in Property. I'm your host, Richard Swan, and in today's show, we have this fabulous gentleman. If you're watching online, you can see him to the side there, Mr. Tom Dillon. Now, first of all, Tom, just hello and welcome, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I was doing a bit of research, as every good guest should, and that's the note for future guests, by the way. And it's incredible the breadth. I don't need to tell you really because you were there for most of them. But what an incredible breadth of guests you've had on in the past. I didn't manage to catch up with all. How many have you had? It's like 1,000 or something ridiculous.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So many years of it, and so much fun and different. Yeah, you're right. Different characters, different guests, and that's something you know about. Because amongst many other things, amongst being you're a property investor yourself, mainly based in Manchester, but we're going to have a wee chat about where you are today. You run whole networking events and stuff, which is brilliant. I love that kind of stuff. But you're a podcaster. You're a podcaster as well. So tell the folks out there, what's it called? Where can we find it, first of all?
Sure. It's the Cuppa Coffee Property Podcast. So just if you search for Cuppa on most platforms, you'll find it.
Fabulous. And as a coffee drinker, I love that name as soon as you said it. And you know what it's like, different people, we're all doing, different things in different places. We've actually had a cracking little preamble chat there, all about life and existentialism and happiness and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
and
sure.
you'd a cracking phrase of, we are all just monkeys in shoes. I bloody love that.
Well, it's true, isn't it? Yeah. Do you ever have guests on? I have we're lucky enough to have quite a few guests on, as do you. And sometimes you get guests who are so much more intelligent than I am, and clearly like from a different background, often like finance or like, and they start using words I either don't know or don't, I've heard of. Like people talk about mergers and acquisitions. I know broadly what that is, but I've never done one.
That's right. That's right.
I couldn't eat a whole one, and so sometimes you get a guest on, and you think, by the way, this won't be a problem today. But sometimes you get a guest on, you think, wow, this person is just better than I am. But like the guy that you, at the time of recording, one's just been released from you from this French chap last week. Everyone, stop watching this. Go and watch that guy, because that guy's up at 5 o'clock in the morning writing books, and I struggle to get out of bed for a normal time of breakfast. So you've had a great range of guests on.
I really have. I've been so privileged, and I think that just shows, especially in the world of property, that variety is there. I love that. There's so many people in different locations using different strategies and tactics, different backgrounds, different goals, different ambitions. Oh, this guy wants to be a multi-zillionaire working 24/7 and 42 homes around the world and a portfolio that would make your eyes bleed. And this wee woman over here, guess what? She's just a wee woman doing well. She's bringing up 3 kids. She's just building up steadily. She's decided buy-to-lets, that's for her. Just building them up steadily. She's got 3 or 4 and things are good, and she's taking the kids on holiday and stuff. That's success as well, in my view. Somebody else doesn't want to own property at all. Listen, I just like doing flips, or I just like sourcing them for investors, whatever. Do what you do. I think that's one of the most amazing things in property, and no doubt you see that through your guests and through people you work with and through the networking events that you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of different ways to skin a cat. And that's great news, because it means that if you're thinking about getting into property, probably the method you're thinking about now isn't the right one, but don't worry about it. Give that a go. Whatever it is you're thinking about, it's like that, like those board games, isn't it? What are you thinking of? Like whatever it is you're thinking of now probably isn't the right answer, but who cares? Like do that for a bit. You'll work out, this either doesn't suit me or doesn't work in the current market for whatever reason, or doesn't work in the current market for me for whatever reason. Okay, well, what does work? And by being involved, by meeting some people, by having your mind open, by trying to use that whole thing about you've got 2 ears in one mouth, to try and use them in that proportion, which is something I struggle with. But if you can do that, a little bit of those things, usually you'll find a way to whatever the right thing is for you, and you probably change your mindset along the way. And I'm trying not to be sexist there, but just use my own experience, which is my experience has been that typily it was more common for men to be like, I'm going to have 1,000 properties by next week, when they first start out, including me, by the way, and much more common for women, and of course there are exceptions to this, but to be much more sensible and be like, oh, well, we're going to try and do this and create a great income for whatever reason, right? Because we want to go traveling or whatever it is. And I find that a lot of people start with 1,000 properties a week and then eventually tone it down, and that's fine too, or tone it up, go whichever way you want.
That's right.
But, just to try and find your own way. And going back, I like to go back to the old school stuff, because like how far has the market changed, but also as the strategies changed. My dad was an investor, albeit small time, and that's probably where I picked up my love for the thing. Albeit it put me off for 20 years before I got into it. But anyway, it's a different story. But the point is, when he was doing this, like his method was, he was a handyman. That's his route into it. He was practical, practical person. So I'm not. But so he got into it that way, and then he just bought houses, did them up himself, rented them out. This is before buy-to-let mortgages or any of this stuff. And then and that was it. There was no networking meetings. Nobody talked about it. There was no no buy-to-let mortgages. A lot of these things we take for granted now. No gas safety certificates. I mean, there should have been, but there weren't. Right? So so it's like, and then you compare that to now, and then you compare it to 50 years time. Your guy we were just talking about there. Talking about AI and how we're gonna get good, like, solid data to then influence the property market and sort of perfect it, if you like, to get the maximum value out of what we have. Well, that's wow, what crazy world in which we live.
It really is. And the thing about, not only should we look back and see those changes and take them in because we can learn from history, but realise it's going to continue that way. It will never stop doing that way. In my kind of previous corporate life, before I started to get into property project management, there was a particular guy who always said something at the start of a meeting that I loved, and he says, the only constant is change. And I loved that, and he's talking about the change in the project we're doing and this, that, and the other. But it's so true. I mean, we're sitting here looking back, talking about your dad being a handyman, etc., no gas safety stuff. Fast forward another, 5-10 years, who knows? People will look back at this podcast and go, that's weird. Back in those days, back in those dark days, they never bought the property with Bitcoin. Isn't that strange? And they never did such and such, and they never transferred the missives over a galactic gateway to Mars or whatever effect's going to happen. It's never going to stop changing. The law, taxes, strategies, tactics, market, everything. And we just have to accept that.
They have to sign documents with pens, stuff like that.
It's in museums.
We've seen one of those in museums. Even like I was reading just yesterday, I think that's like the something like in London there's been I don't invest in London, I invest in Manchester, but just for sort of for interest, I was reading that the number of HMOs has dropped 13% in London in the last few years, and you're like, well, why is that? That seems odd. It's because I'm sure there's lots of factors, but the big one is that they brought in extra regulations for HMOs, right? So that you have to have certain room sizes, and basically you need a license even for stuff that's 2 stories. And so in certain areas, like I think it was Ealing or somewhere, HMOs are down 60%. And so you look at that, and it's just one touch point in, as you say, this constant journey of change. Like, oh, HMOs are good in Ealing. Oh no, they're not. And that's just one of a million stories happening all at the same time. And the good news about that change is, I think, first of all, it's all signs of the property market. I'm not saying it's always going to be for the better, because I think certain things that have happened have been for the worse, or just cash grabs from government. And by the way, this isn't some anti-government rant. I think government has a difficult job to do, and sometimes they need some cash. So fair enough. But sometimes it's just a cash grab. But often let's try and improve things. Let's try gas safety certificates, EPCs, whatever it might be. Let's try and make things better. I think that's still just about at the heart of what they're trying to do. So as an investor, you can say to yourself, right, well, how does that impact what I'm going to do? For example, you might say, oh, I'm going to do some single lets. Okay, well, that's fine, but just make sure that the chances are, of course we don't know, the chances are within the next 5 to 10 years, the government are going to require you to spend quite a lot of money to get your property up to an EPC C or B or A standard, i.e. Energy efficient. Okay, well, does that still work? With that factored into your numbers, does this strategy still work? If it does, great. If not, well, then maybe use that pretty simple bit of analysis to your advantage to say, well, maybe we need to think about something else.
Yeah, that's right. You're always running your numbers. You always keep your eyes open. You never know what's coming around the corner, and just keep moving forward. Keep those steps forward. And I love touching back to how you kind of started that journey of, just try some things. And then not only will the market tell you stuff and success will tell you stuff, but actually, what do you like? What do you actually enjoy? Because I've kind of, through my mad journey, twists and turns and all sorts of stuff, there's things that I now just no longer do. That, nah, I don't actually want to do that. There's money, there's success, there's this, that, and the other, but nah, it's not for me. I'm going to go this way, and people should do that, because as we spoke earlier about famous books and people on deathbeds and stuff, you've only got one life anyway. So you might as well have some fun with it.
Yeah, and it's so short. Funnily enough, you're absolutely right. So when we do our business partner Chris, when we're doing projects, we nearly always try to look for projects that we can turn into apartments. Right. That's kind of our plan A. there's nothing wrong with having a plan B, and that's, in fact, is a very good idea to have a plan B, and that's often HMOs. So if we can't get the planning for apartments for whatever reason, we try and get HMO in there, and so we've currently got one HMO because the apartments didn't get through planning, so we ended up with the HMO, and that's fine. But a bit like you were saying about things that you don't like doing, we'll do it, but we don't particularly like doing and managing HMOs, because they're a pain in the ass, and nobody wants to do with that. Oh, he stole my yogurt, scenario. So which you don't get with apartments. So even though the return typically around Manchester is higher for HMO, for the same building with the same investment, there are exceptions, of course, but that's typically true. Well, but we still choose to go for the lower return, but the lower management, because we judge that it makes our lives better. Just that you're not getting off scot-free. What do you enjoy doing, Richard?
I love the projects that add value in the way of actually creating a home for someone, and then whether it's kept and they actually rented out, or whether it's a flip and it's moving on. I love that. I love the before and after part of the puzzle. I don't know. I no longer really enjoy. I was telling my business partner about this yesterday. The development stage of land development. I can see there's massive money in it. We've enjoyed a lot of success, but it's so much longer term, so on and so forth. It's just not for me, Whereas he loves it, and we were chatting about this morning, and I says, "That's brilliant. You go with that, And I'm here. I'm part of the fund and everything else. But you do what floats your boat." And for me, they're just, I don't like that. There's too many pieces of the puzzle. I don't like all the different factors involved. So it's just not for me. It's just a personal thing,
Yeah, absolutely right. It's interesting, isn't it? When people are starting out, I've always got an eye on people starting out. I don't know why. I guess that's that. I don't know about you, but I found that the hardest bit. Maybe if you were lucky enough to come from a corporate background, I find that people come from a corporate background. One, and I'm generalizing here, so there'll be exceptions to this, but typically have some money in the bank because that's what the word corporate means, and it also nods at or winks at or kind of gives you a glance. It took me ages to work this out. If someone's coming from a corporate background, that means typically, not always, typically they'll have worked very hard at school, very hard at college, very hard at university, and then got a very good job. And so that usually means they're quite smart and quite hardworking. You put those two things together, and you've got usually an impressive kind of person. And that I find that those people do very well when they're moving into property, because either they were working on something similar before, like, I was doing the accounts for a bit large property firm. That's going to help. That's really going to help when you're trying to manage a single let down the road, right? That's going to now seem easy. So that's kind of a really good route into it. Is that, or it's just like, this person works 14 hours a day, is kind of used to that, is driven, is motivated. So I find that corporate is like, if someone tells me now they've come from a corporate background, it's like that's almost a shortcut word for, this person's probably going to do quite well. Again, there are exceptions. There's some people it just doesn't suit, but
that's an interesting observation. Good stuff. This is great. I wish I had a coffee. I wish I had a cuppa just to kind of celebrate the podcast that you have and this chat, because I'm loving this chat. Just two people involved in property and just sharing stories and ideas and opinions the way it should be, And was that one of the reasons why yourself and Chris had started the networking event? And obviously we want to talk about that, because you do. Is it a weekly basis you still do it on? What's
sure. So we started in 2012, and the inspiration was that like people coming from corporate backgrounds talked about. I came from a background, a kind of varied background, but at the time I was working 7 hours a week in Halfords. So it wasn't. I would not describe it as corporate. Whatever the opposite of corporate is, casual. I was a casual employment, and all these networking meetings, which by the way are great. Like I have nothing but good things to say about most networking meetings. Were 20 quid a pop, and of course if it's 20 quid a pop, the person's got to pay for the hotel or whatever else. So again, I'm not begrudging them the 20 quid. It might be 30 these days, and but I didn't have it. I was earning. That was about my full-time whack at the time. My 7 hours a week. So I didn't have the money. I wanted to go to these meetings, didn't have the money. I thought, well, the obvious thing is to start one. And so I started one. Also, I'd meet these people on a monthly meeting, and I wouldn't see them for a month, surprisingly enough, until the next one. And I felt like, hang on a minute, I'm going to meet, if there's no meetings sometimes in August and say in December for Christmas, I'm going to meet them 10 times a year. That's a bit slow. So I thought, start a weekly meeting. So we started a weekly meeting at the Cuppa Coffee coffee shop in Salford Quays, hence the name. That's now closed. So we've outlived the coffee shop we're named after.
No way.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, isn't it? I know. We're gonna have to. I don't know if we need a rebrand. We're gonna have to call ourselves Costa, but then we're gonna run into all kinds of legal problems. So we'll probably stick with Cuppa, right? And So anyway, so I started this meeting, and it's been going ever since. Then COVID hit, and we that's when we started doing the podcast. Thought, well, people can't meet face to face, and then since COVID's kind of calmed down a bit, we've gone to doing alternate. So we do 1 week's face to face in Salford Keys, and then the other week targeted at people who maybe aren't either in the area or whatever else, because lots of people invest in Manchester and everywhere else for that matter, from whether it's Aberdeen or or Timbuktu. So those people can then meet on at the online one, and then we record our podcast there live with an audience. So it's kind of interesting, but unique.
Tremendous. And that's is every Saturday. What's the details, folks should know?
Sure. So it's we run the meeting from 9 to 10:30, and the first half, the first 40 minutes is you guys doing the work. We do breakout rooms and get you to actually network, because I find with online meetings often I'm just talked at for an hour and a half, which again is fine. That's the host's decision. But I'm going to actually do some networking, right? That's why I've turned up. So you get to chat to people you otherwise probably would never meet. With not many rules or anything. And then the second half is the podcast recording, and the most exciting part for most people is that it's free. So it's a price point most people can get behind. So yeah, but feel free to come along.
Tremendous stuff. That's brilliant. And Manchester, we've mentioned it a couple of times now, of course. That's where you kind of based, focused on, etc. But there's another M in your life just now. Where are you dialed in from today? It's not Manchester, is it?
No, it's not. It's I'm in Montenegro.
Montenegro.
Yeah, Montenegro, which means Black Mountain, which is obvious when you think about the two words, right? But it had never occurred to me before.
There you go.
For those watching, I realise not everyone's watching, but for those that are just behind me, is one of the most beautiful bays in the world, Kotor Bay. I've not been to all the bays in the world, but of all the ones I've been to, this is one of the nicest. The lighting, of course, means you can't see it, so you just have to take or Google it. Google it and look at the images. It's stunning. And a really nice spot, Kotor Bay. Montenegro, very mountainous country. 2/3 the size of Wales, as Rod Gilbert points out. Everything's measured by the size of Wales, isn't it? So it's a small country. Used to be connected with Serbia. Growing up, I remember Serbia and Montenegro was kind of the country name. They had a sort of peaceful split up. This is a history lesson now. They had a peaceful split up, and now in Montenegro. But to link that back to property, and why should anybody care that I'm in Montenegro? One, they shouldn't. Two, but two is like, a lot of people get into property for some sort of freedom, whether it's freedom from persecution from various legal authorities, or
freedom from Halfords.
Yeah, freedom from Halfords.
And we're not dissing Halfords.
No, we're not. They gave me some. That whole thing. They gave me some work when nobody else would. So congratulations to them.
But you're right, freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. So
freedom, or freedom to travel, or freedom with family, all those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. Financial freedom or economic endurance, as one of my mentors prefer to say it. Whatever it is for you, when people get into property, often it's for that reason. And so I'm hopefully living proof, and by the way, there's lots of other living proof, lots of other people doing this, that it's possible to achieve it. It took me a long time, and I think some people have done it much faster than me. But to have some location freedom and some financial freedom, it is great. It is worth the time and effort to put into it. The one myth I'd try and bust a little bit is people think you need financial freedom before you have location freedom. I'd say in property that's not necessarily true. And so if that's a belief that's holding you back, because it held me back for a while, is examine that belief. Like, for example, if you had half of your income already kind of passive, or some kind of passive, then why not start traveling now? You can write bad emails, poorly worded emails from from the south of Spain, just as you can from your home office. So
is that one of your skill sets, Tom? Is it?
It's more or less it's all I've got. It's what I've been relying on now for 10 years. I think writing poor emails is a very good thing, because if you write great emails, you're going to spend too long doing it.
Exactly. You need to move on, then you'll never get to Montenegro. No, but you're right, and I love that. We can share these stories with each other. Listen, I'm doing this, and I'm going away for a month at a time and travel. Wow, no way, seriously, I never even thought of that. Okay, and we're opening these wee boxes inside people's heads, because rather than just being one of the masses and just following what everybody tells us to do, and you've got to do it this way, who says you do your own life, whatever
exactly
that
right.
level is, or travel, or family, no family, whatever.
Yeah, it's fascinating as well. There's we do some mentoring, and one thing we do in one of the early sessions with everyone, just again like that kind of open the brain kind of idea, is we look at the and I'm going to butcher this because I've not, I can never remember. It's got a long name, but it's like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I think I've got those right.
Right.
And for anyone interested, Google them. There's 17, I think 17, the last count, UN Development Goals, and it's everything from women's education to clean water to planting more trees, like reforestation, all the good stuff that you hear about in the world, like those kind of changes, reduction in diseases and things like wars. Very prescient at the moment. Trying to achieve a bit more peace, and we get people to look at that and start to think, how can you make which one of those matters to you, and what are you doing currently to help with that thing if it matters to you? Like, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. As Jimmy Carr says, stay in your lane. You can't fix everything, so worry about what matters to you, and then maybe try and fix it. Try and fix it sounds a bit glib, doesn't it? But try and have a little bit of impact on it, because it'll make you feel good. It's that whole thing, like, that whole, I want to be happy, searching for happiness. Maybe I think really people are searching for meaning, searching for connectedness. I think that trumps happiness every time, or more accurately, the one leads to the other. People think they're searching for happiness, maybe, but okay, what's the route? How do I get there? What transport do I use? Where's the bus stop? And I think that that is meaning, is connectedness to something greater than ourselves. And so you need to have a look into, find out what that is for you, and then make small steps towards it. So I'll give you a personal example. I'm big on trees. I think let's plant some trees. There seems to be not enough trees. Like, the UK has the fewest amount of trees as a percentage of its ground cover of, I think, any country in Europe. And it's like a 10%. Clearly, if we're going to have a sustainable world, it needs to be more than 10%. I think we can all agree on that. And so planting some trees. But I thought, well, I can't, I'm not going to go out there and buy the Amazon. It seems expensive, and there's plenty of trees there already, right? So where do you start with something like that? And I think the starting point's key. So, as in, get started. What's that whole thing? Get started now, get perfect later, kind of idea. And so, personally, I set up something on, and this isn't a plug. I'm not getting paid for this, but just a personal experience. I set up a forest, an online forest on ecology, with an I rather than a Y at the end for ecology. There's lots of other providers. Other providers are available. And you can just pay a little bit of money. So I have a monthly subscription, and some trees get planted somewhere I'm never going to go. But is that saving the world? Well, it's not hurting, is it? And it's kind of whatever that thing is for you. I've got a friend who's really into, like, women's education in poorer parts of the world, and she does a little bit towards that. She puts, she donates a little bit of money to charity, and occasionally goes on a visit to see what work is being done there. I think that, as like, if property can give you that, can help you to achieve some meaning and some connectedness, that will have a massive positive impact on your mental health, which is probably the most important thing, really.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I always kind of chased, just for myself personally, is peace of mind. That's always my kind of barometer. How am I feeling just now? How am I doing this month or this week or whatever it is? How is my peace of mind? Is it up? Is it down? Am I kind of struggling? Where am I? All the other metrics can kind of come and go, to be honest. And we were speaking about this earlier before we started recording. We have this metric in the Western world of money, and that's it. It's chosen, and it's a useful one, because we've got to function in the world. But it's not all that. It's not all about that. If you're some zillionaire and you're morbidly obese and you've been divorced 17 times and none of your kids talk to you and everything else, how successful actually are you? And I love the fact that you went deep there. There was a real deep chat about life and thinking about it, because property is a tool. Property investment is a tool, but it's a fantastic tool, and you can use it. And you've honestly you've laid so many beautiful wee gold nuggets there. It's a tool that you can use to go and travel if you want to, before you've even reached a very massive, kind of milestone. You can do it right now. And more importantly, for your happiness, connectivity. I loved all that. What is your charity? Have you got a religious thing that you want to do? Have you got something spiritual you want to do? Go for it, because that is life at the end of it all. Those are the memories that you've got. And it's funny, when you were chatting there about the trees, you were triggering me little tiny things in my life, where I was thinking about recently. Myself, my wife were chatting, where one of the companies that we've got and we use for ourselves, we started to do two things with it. We started to make donations specifically from that company over to the local food bank in our area. And it felt so great, because it's just something that we believe in and we want to help people. And then another one was coming up to Christmas time. There's a specific charity that my wife knows that they do some amazing stuff for kids. And it's in our community, it's in our towns and areas. And taking that money from that company that has property and going, there you go. you go and do stuff for those kids, that felt bloody brilliant. That felt better than the tens of thousands of pounds that, profit you're making on every flip. It actually feels more successful. It feels better. And I think we've got
It's amazing, isn't it?
have that. It is. It so is.
If you take anything from this podcast, it should be how overrated hair is. But the second thing you should take from this podcast is if you take anything is grab a fiver. Everyone's got a fiver. If you haven't got a fiver, geez, well, I don't know. Stop listening to the podcast. Go out there and do something to get a fiver. Once you've got the fiver, give it away. And I realize we've all done that before, but go and give away to something new, like say something meaningful to you, whether that's in your case, a local food bank. You feel $1 million, for $5. That's a good return on investment. And it starts to tune you into stuff. One of the first property viewings I ever went on, I've probably been to 3 or 4 viewings, so I'm now on viewing number 5 thereabouts. I've not bought anything at this point. I've got I've got the same number of houses I was born with, which is none. And it's quite a full viewing, maybe 10 people, and everyone was looking quite stressed and quite harrowed, as they do, because everyone's like, this is basically a competition. Like, we're not here to make friends, we're here to judge whether this property is going to work and to buy it or not. And I thought to myself, it's funny this, isn't it? We're all walking around, nobody's hugging this house. Now, that's a crazy thing to say, like, why would anybody hugging this house? But it's at that point I kind of realized, everyone's kind of poking this house, seeing what the house can do for them, and that's right and proper. That's what property investment is. But like, my point was, nobody's on the corner of this like terrace going, oh yeah, this is great, thanks house, wonderful for all the wonderful service you put in for keeping people warm and dry, and like, and you suddenly realize, it helped me to realize, maybe I've just been drinking too much, but anyway, we're in this, the property is a tool. Like, we're not in this, nobody loves houses in the sense of like, 3-bed terrace. It's amazing. Like, we love property for what it will do. Well, then don't lose sight of the second part. I think a lot of people do, and they substitute. They substitute in how many zeros in my bank balance for how am I feeling. If you want to realize, and this, like everything else I've said today, it's all stolen from somebody else better than me, which is a good reason to get an Audible subscription if you haven't already. For those listening, I've lost my train of thought.
Oh no, he's lost it. You were just about to give us the answer.
I was going to give the golden ticket.
Oh no.
The golden ticket will hopefully come back. Golden ticket, Audible subscription, hugging 3-bed houses. No, move on. We'll come back.
Gone. No bother. Right, let me jump you on those M's from Montenegro back to Manchester, right?
Sure.
So I want to. This is why I love meeting different people from different locations. We spent a lot of time in Edinburgh just at the weekend there, chatting to people about that market, and then before that, we're up in Aberdeen chatting about the market. It's brilliant stuff. Yeah. So for yourself, Manchester, folks, whenever it's safe to do so, go into the show notes, go into the links, you'll see the website, some cracking projects that you share as well, like some Moss Road and stuff in Trafford, how you've done it, and so on and so forth. Manchester, talk to us. In general terms, how is it? How's it doing? Has it got a lot of potential still? Does it have a particular flavour about it? Oh, it's all service accommodation now, Richard. It's crazy. I mean, what would you say?
I'd say, first of all, it's like a mini London, but a lot lower prices. By which I mean, you could do a lot of strategies and they'll work. And I mean a mini London in both in a very respectful kind of good news kind of a way, but also slightly bad news kind of a way. In that, obviously, with recent interest rate rises and price rises and rent rises, can't think of anything that's falling. But anyway, something must be falling, I imagine. But returns, I think net returns are falling, and that's okay. That's what happens when interest rates rise. As I think you were talking about with a guest, it's property cyclical, right? And I think we've entered the part of the cycle where people typically are making less money or exiting the market or a bit of both. So what? So my point is, if you're in certain areas around Salford Quays, which is where all the media stuff is, BBC and lots of other media companies around there, then service accommodation, things like that will work well. There's big blocks of apartments, happy days. That's the kind of thing you're going to be looking at, through to much more traditional semi-detached houses in lots of the suburbs, through to big high rises in the city centre and everything in between. So you've got it all there. I think we're looking for. Let's try and get immediately to something interesting. And of course, hopefully, it's been fairly interesting so far. But something interesting, I think, is true for Manchester, and I say this in the hope that everyone disagrees with me and it all kicks off in the comments or whatever, right? But a controversial opinion would be, I'm not sure single lets work very well anymore in Manchester, as they haven't done for 20, 30 years in London. Of course, are the people making good money in London single lets? Maybe, but you've got to put a lot in up front to to get, if you're buying a 3-bed house anywhere in London, that's nearly, not quite, but nearly going to end with $1 million, isn't it? Well, it's not quite that way in Manchester, but where you could buy something until quite recently for 100 and something, and get a decent return. Now maybe the prices haven't changed that much. Maybe even they've come down slightly. But if you're having to pay 120, 130, 150 for a property, and the rents, the rents have gone up, but I just think the rent's gone up quite a lot more slowly than the interest payments. Right. I think everyone has to make their own decisions, but if you're going to get £300 or £400 a month net after all your costs, including your mortgage, if you're going to be getting £300 or £400 a month out at the end of the month, how much are you prepared to leave in there? And if the answer for you is 40 grand, great, good news. Manchester's open for business. But I think a lot of investors want even new investors, or maybe especially newer investors with no money, or little, smaller pots or no pots, want a better return than that. I think Manchester's almost kind of edging itself out. It might come back in, right, if rates go lower. My dad in 1972 refused to buy a house. Who's from a man who sat on a horse for 300 quid. Those days are gone. That's right. And for many years as a child, we had to go a different route. We had to avoid that road because that property had boomed in value, and he couldn't face driving past it. And it took me ages to work out why we were taking a different route. The house is now worth about £500,000.
Wow.
So that's the Manchester market.
Okay. Yeah. And if we pull out wider than that, and we kind of touched on a few things here, for example, service accommodation, just mentioned that. Up here in Scotland, went through a massive loads of changes with licensing, new regulations, still finding our feet with it, still trying to get to grips with it all. As usual, someone in government might just say something and it's not actually, properly planned out or properly funded or whatever. But, by hook or by crook, we're getting there bit by bit. There's lots of similar chat down in England and Wales, white papers, consultations, etc. Do you see it coming? Is regulation just always something that comes? What's your own opinions there?
Yeah, I did not to plug the podcast because I'll summarize it here, but I did a 3-parter on the history of regulation in the UK. So if anyone's interested, go and check that out. It was early this year, so it's still kind of up to date. And in that we were talking about, when I did the research, of course now I've forgotten it all, so but hence go and check it out. But the story in the last 20, 30 years has been broadly tightening regulation because, for various reasons. One is the government wants to make sure things are safe. I genuinely think that's one of their priorities, and so it should be, right? I think 2 is they want to try and make sure they're getting their fair cut of that income, and maybe so they should as a government. That controversial opinion, because I think certain taxes like Section 24 are unjust and poorly done. That's my, again, opinion alert. That's my opinion.
The converted.
Right, yeah, and then there's some things which are kind of very interesting on the edge ones. EPCs, energy performance certificates. They headlined that we're all gonna need to spend thousands of pounds in many cases to get, or tens of thousands of pounds to get a single dwelling or a block of dwellings up to a grade C, and now that seems to have faded away or been postponed. But that will come back. Like that's not gone, right? Of course, so. They're not going to go, actually, it's fine, everything should be a G, let's chill out and relax on that one. That's not how that's going, right? And then there's been everything in between, like little cash grabs and selective licensing. I'm personally, again, very much an opinion. I don't think it works. I'm all for let's try and punish some bad landlords. I just think the tool they've chosen simply doesn't work. The tool, all it really does is put a fee onto good landlords who are going to follow the rules anyway. The bad landlords don't follow the rules, and they don't have the resources from that scheme to then go after them with enough venom or enough detail to actually change things in an area. I've got a few properties in a selective licensing area, and that's so those are just examples. Right. Your question was, and for once I've remembered it, but was what about the mood music maybe in Manchester and the UK for regulation? I think it's coming. Some of it's here already. Some of it's coming in the post. And you kind of go, oh well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is lower returns. Well, let's get real. What it means is lower returns or people selling up. And you could say, well, maybe some opportunities there with people selling up, that if they're doing that in a distressed way, and of course that's a bad thing, but if they are, then there's maybe an opportunity to help them and to make some profit with helping them to exit what might be an uncomfortable and unpleasant situation for them in sort of win-win fashion. But it's there's is there more regulation coming? Hell yeah, there is.
Yeah, definitely. And the other big one we always hear kind of across, I mean, we invest across the UK, but here in the news coming across from England and Wales is the whole renter reforms and kicking that down the road and trying to get rid of the way they handle evictions and so on and so forth. What's the kind of mood there as a property investor with things?
Well, again, all opinion alerts, but that's good because you're asking me my opinion. I'm just desperately trying not to get punched in the street.
It's always a good tactic.
yeah, that's always a solid starting point, right? Which is I think that they handle it quite badly. It seemed to me hey, please elect us type of idea to say they'll get rid of Section 21, the no fault eviction route, of course. And then they've, I think, made a sensible decision in canning that off. You could have a sensible decision. You could say that they made a necessary decision because it seemed like a lot of their own backbenchers, Tory backbenchers, were simply not going to vote for it, so they have no choice but to roll that one back because those backbenchers are landlords. And I just think that what are you trying to do, Mr. Government or Mrs. Government? Maybe if you're genuinely trying to help renters, then getting rid of Section 21 currently is a bad idea, because what it will do is is leading a small exodus from the market by landlords, because they won't want to be involved in a market where they can't get rid of tenants efficiently, bad tenants, that is, efficiently. And so they will if they can't get rid of tenants, they'll get out of the market. That will lead to a even more of a shortage or scarcity for tenants. That's a bad impact on tenants. It's worth remembering that banks and lenders did not get into the buy-to-let market until Section 21 was brought in. When that was brought in, suddenly the banks went, okay, that's now a market we can trust, that this will be a functioning market, that people, this is a decent asset class that we can get involved in. Until then, it's difficult or impossible to get lending. So if you reverse that, maybe you reverse the bank's involvement in this whole thing, that would be exciting.
Oh yeah, that's a cracking point. That's a real good observation you've made there, how those two tie together. Definitely. Yeah. And then the funny thing is the whole supply and demand thing. Well, actually, Mr. and Mrs. Government, that was supposed to be your job in the first place. Were you not supposed to take all their taxes and kind of deliver all these homes for all these people? How are you now punishing all the people who are actually taking up the slack from your job? It's kind of very back to front. That's good. It's good, is it? But it's just opinion. It's just chat. This conversation, which is what we love. It's absolutely tremendous. I'm raging. I've not got that coffee. I really am.
Well, it's funny you mentioned about the properties. This one, I think the other one's probably most. I think I've got 90% of investors still behind me. As in okay, this guy, all right. I'm still not convinced, but okay.
For Prime Minister,
right? They've not actually wandered off or started waving flags at me yet, right? But this one will be interesting. I was reading that the government hasn't hit its own fairly modest, fairly small C conservative home building targets since I think 1974 was the last year it hit its own target, and that's the target most people agree is too low, right? In order to reach parity. Here's my thought: is how many? Maybe this is going to be very different if you live in Zone 1 in London, Central Manchester versus Aberdeen or the Lakes, right? But how many more homes do we want? Because the government targets something like 200, 300,000 somewhere there each year. I don't want that many new homes. I don't want them. I'm not standing on the border saying everybody out, right? This isn't some anti-immigration rant, but it is we've got a fairly small island with 80 million people at the last count. I think that's enough, isn't it? Maybe you start wandering off property and into other topics that are just you don't want to talk about, but they're just very, very touchy topics. But here's something that's never talked about that I think should be: is how many homes, for example, yourself, how many houses do you want built in the UK? Because for me, it's either none or very close to none. Right. I'm not saying, therefore, let me put a tiny bit of context on this. There are 500,000 HMOs in the UK, right? Roughly 5 beds each. If we say they're roughly 5 beds each, I've never been able to find the average number of beds in a HMO. But if we go for 5, which is on the lower end, because there are some that are 50, right?
Yeah.
But if we take there's an average of 5, that's 2.5 million homes or dwellings for people. Well, what about those? Why don't we do more of that? That's 2.5 million people living in HMO rooms. That's good, isn't it? Oh, well, good. I don't want to live in an HMO. I think most people live in HMOs, including mine, don't want to be there. It's their only option. So I'm not saying that's the panacea. Let's do more of that. No. What I'm saying is, give me a counter example. There's 600 homes being built on greenfield land near my parents' place, and I get it, right? I'm not anti-development like that. We need some houses. People need somewhere to live. This is all a balancing act. But
Yes,
you
that's
ask,
right.
if somebody said to me, "Hey Tom, would you sign that off?" And I don't. Again, it's not NIMBYism. It's not because it's near my parents' place. It could be near. Let's imagine it's near your parents' place. You know, dear
Right.
listener, dear viewer, right? Do you want those houses built? I don't. I wouldn't sign that piece of paper. So, so I think there's a very interesting debate to be had about how many houses, what's the total number of houses we want or dwellings we want in the UK, and how do we want to provide those? Because I've never heard a sensible debate on it.
No, it's a good point. Just a figure gets bandied about. We never hit the figure anyway, and no one really talks about the figure. It's bizarre. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Good stuff, my man. Listen, I want to be respectful of your time. My goodness, we've been chatting away here, and I've still not had my coffee yet. But let's kind of look back and look forward. On your journey, what you've done, how you kind of got along the way, things you've started, the podcast, the networking, the projects you've put together, etc. What ones kind of stick out for you? What ones do you look back and go, that was bloody great. I love doing that, or that was a brilliant project, or whatever it was. You get a nice feeling from it. What pops to your mind?
This is again one. I think my natural focus is on people who are just starting out, and it's because, well, first of all, if you've got 500 properties, you're okay, aren't you? Like probably things are good. You're probably listening to this with a colourful umbrella drink, and basically fine. But if, like me, you were working 7 hours a week at Halfords and you didn't have a lot of money, or in my case, any money at all, then I think you could use a little bit of encouragement, and there's sometimes scarce enough of that around. Like these days, maybe there's this podcast, right, to help people out, and my podcast and whatever else. But what I'd say to answer your question is what gives me the tingles, right, when I think about it and think about what I've achieved, because we all make loads of mistakes. That's easy stuff. And making mistakes, nay bother, I can do that for you right now, but about the good stuff, which is what you asked about. And for me, it's the fact that I made a start. I despite all the evidence to the contrary that this was a bad idea, I got out of my own head, got it together, and made a start. Because once you make a start, there's that whole, I'm stealing this again, there's that snowball effect that starts, that it starts to build momentum. Suddenly you're attending a networking meeting. Suddenly you can tell people you've got 2 or 3 properties rather than, I haven't got anything at the moment, and then suddenly people start to take you more seriously. And suddenly like a lender or a bridging finance company or someone offers you a bit of finance. You think, there's another, suddenly the world starts to open up a little bit. So that's what gives me the tingles when I look back is, like, again, you asked about my journey. So just briefly, I've currently got a portfolio of single lets, and then with business partner Chris, because we met sort of we got together in business 5 years ago or so. I don't know, I've not actually raised my hand there, but it says
that's funny, that the little emoji.
I've done a little hand wave, but those on the podcast, my hand waves popped up. But ignore that. And then we've gone on to do a small number of blocks of apartments. That's been our journey, and a bit like you were saying, are we doing 84 million quid a year in turnover? Absolutely not. Am I currently in Montenegro and about to go to a bakery and get some baked goods and then do more or less whatever I want with today? Yeah, I am. And for me, that's more important, right?
Yeah, totally, my man. And I respect you for doing that. I really do. I toast your success, because it definitely is. And is that, have you reached the point you think when you look forward, this is the kind of lifestyle I want, this is the kind of level I want, and I'll just want it to continue? Or have you got any kind of wee madcap project in your head? I wish I could do such and such, or I fancy buying a castle, or I want to, completely buy a commercial thing and make 17 shops. Any kind of wee things in your head for the future, or you reached a place you want to just continue?
Both, and that's one I struggle with, right? It's like I've stolen this. How do you balance? And this is one, for those experienced investors who are still with us and probably come to the end of their colourful umbrella drink. How do you balance being happy and contented now, having meaning, having connectedness? How do you balance that with striving for more? Because if there's that striving for more, there's the lack. There's got to be a gap between who you are now, or what you are now, or what you have now. Hopefully, one of the first two, and where you want to be, what you want to have, what you're going to become, that sort of thing. And how do you balance that with I'm also having a great time now, enjoying today, living in the moment, and enough right now? Answer, don't know. Answers on a postcard, please, because I'd love the answer to that one. But I think it's just a human thing. You've got to try and do a bit of both. So I'm happy with where I am now. I'm delighted. My friend said the other day, he said, we spend the first half of our lives, maybe to about 40, thinking, oh, what will I become? And then after you're 40, you think to yourself, how on earth did I become this? But I think there's a like a relaxedness after you become 40. I'm 43.
Yeah.
Where you think, well, this is it, So that
Yeah.
doesn't mean this is it, like finished, but this is
No.
it, like this is what I've done. So then to answer your question, I've always said I'm big on planting trees. I'd love to plant a million or a billion trees before I die somewhere. I'd like to own the land those trees sit on, and I'd like to continue doing this stuff in property. One of my passions, I think, from reading a little bit about, you might be one of yours too, is I really like finding very tired properties, like stuff that we've just bought a project in a very nice part of Manchester called Urmston, a sort of suburb of Manchester for those who know it, and it's a very nice area, and the house has got pigeons living in the roof and has had for years, and that kind of project really excites me because you can do a good thing for that community, for that street. They'll have been looking at an eyesore for 20 years, 30 years, and you're going to turn that into 3 very nice apartments. Like, yes please, I'll do that all day long. And I'm lucky enough, and now good enough, I hope, to have shown that we're able to do that, to find the money to do that, to bring that to market, to make some money for ourselves. More importantly, to bring that to that community. That gives me a feeling of connectedness and meaning, and put some cash in my pocket to do the other projects I'm also passionate about. Like, come on, that's the winning ticket right there, isn't it?
It so is, but man, I'm going to give you a round of applause. I really do. That's tremendous, Tom. There you go, folks. Mr. Tom Dillon. So, podcast wise, remember, Cuppa Coffee Property Podcast. Get in there, get subscribed, follow that, and especially go back to the ones he was talking about. He had 3 in a row, I think it was, all about regulations, the history of it. Make sure you go into that one. That sounds fantastic. And can you do the networking? Remember, he spoke about that as well. Cuppa Property Networking Investment Group, they're in Manchester, in the real world, and online as well. So, is that something you can connect with? All those links are inside the show notes, so do them when it's safe to do so. But Tom, for dialing in from Montenegro before you get dragged away kicking and screaming to a wonderful bakery, thanks a million for being on This Week in Property.
Thank you, Richard. It's been a real pleasure, real honour. Thank you.